Hey guys, going to be running through some test hands of the Undead Lock custom supported archetype. Here we go. So just caveating here that this deck is kind of hard to demonstrate its full scope by just using the solo mode. You really have to see it in action over the course of multiple turns to see how it works. But we are opening up with Necro Corridor, Necro Yard, Torrential Tribute, Zone of the Necro, and Necro Soldier. So the setup that I would go with here is basically set everything. Activate Necro Yard, normal summon the Necro Soldier. On our opponent's turn during their standby phase, Necro Soldier's effect would activate, allowing it to summon another copy of itself, and then that one's effect will activate, allowing us to summon the third copy. And if you wanted to, again, if you wanted to, what you could do is on that third summon, activate Torrential Tribute on your own field. I would probably wait for my opponent to do something, but if you wanted to, you could do that, and that would destroy all three of your Necro Soldiers, which would trigger all three of their effects, which is that when it is destroyed, you can add one Necro card from your deck or hand deck to your hand, then send one card from the top of your opponent's deck to the grave for every Necro Soldier in your grave. So we'll get 3 searches of Necro cards, so let that be Necro Cycle, Accursed Necro Twins, and let's go with Necro Jar. And then we mill 9 off our opponent's deck, and thanks to Necro Yard, we mill another 2. And also thanks to Necro Yard, the monsters that are sent to the deck from the deck to the grave can't be summoned from the grave and have their effects negated during that turn. So we're locking our opponent out of any of those monsters of those 11 cards that we just milled. They can't make use of them. And I'll explain why I searched these out here in a second, but for the rest of our opponent's turn, other than that Torrential Tribute for disruption, we have Zoma the Necro, who, when summoned as a monster, has the effect where it can negate an effect in the grave or one that targets a card in the grave, and it negates that activation, then it destroys itself, and when it destroys itself, you can send 2 cards from the top of your opponent's deck to the grave, then draw 1 card for every monster sent to the grave this way. So if we were to do that, if our opponent were to try and draw it out, we would mill 2 more, and then mill 2 more on top of that with Necro Yard, and if our opponent milled any monsters with Zoma, we would draw 2. But if we keep our Zoma on the board, then we can also activate Necro Corridor, which, when we have a Necro monster on the board, such as Zoma the Necro, this makes it so that each player can only declare an attack with 1 monster per turn. For you, that doesn't matter too much because you're trying to win by milling. But also, your opponent can control more monsters than you do, send all the others to the grave. So in addition to our Torrential Tribute getting rid of their field, we also have Necro Corridor just in case they're able to recover, bring out our Zoma, then send the monsters that they control to the grave until they only have 1 to match our 1. Now, on our ensuing turn, I'll explain why I searched these 3 specific cards out. First thing I would do is, if my opponent does have any monsters in the grave, I can use Necro Yard's third effect to banish 2 of them to add a Disgraced Mage. Got 1 already, our opponent doesn't need to know that. We'll grab another one. So not only searching Disgraced Mage, but banishing 2 of our opponent's monsters from the grave. And now, to make use of the cards that we searched out. So Necro Jar is a good card to have, especially in certain matchups where your opponent runs a lot of targeting effects via spell. So this protects all your Necro cards from being targeted by your opponent's spell effects. His other effect is an Ignition one, where you can mill 2 from your opponent's deck, and this guy gains 200 attack for each. And thanks to Necro Yard, they will mill another 2 on top of that. And then if he's destroyed, you can send 1 card from the top of their opponent's deck to the grave for each multiple of 200 attack that this card's attack on the field was higher than its original attack. So we'll get to that here in a second. But up to now, we have milled 9 with the soldiers, plus 2 with Necro Yard, plus... okay, let's say our Zoma's still on the board, so we didn't mill anything with that, but we did get 2 with Necro Jar, plus another 2 with Necro Yard. We'll activate the Accursed Necro Twins, set the Necro Cycle... Oh, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. This guy has the... Girls have the ability where you can set a Necro spell or trap from your deck to the field. Let's grab... It kind of depends on what our opponent has. If they have something we want to get rid of, we can use Spirit Sword of Sealing. If otherwise we just kind of want to bolster our defenses, we can set another Zoma the Necro. In case they got rid of our field and we don't have the Necro Corridor anymore, we could set that. So a couple of different options there, but just for the sake of making things different, I will grab the Spirit Sword of Sealing. And then our opponent draws 1. And we can get rid of our opponent's card monster through Spirit Sword to Ceiling. And if we wanted to, we could attack with one of these guys. Set Necrocycle, and now back to our opponent's turn. So they have drawn twice for turn, and we've milled this much up to this point, and they've drawn 5 for their opening hand. So 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 23. So if they're running a 40 card deck, we've already gone through 23 of their cards. We also have the potential to do some more damage by using Necrocycle. Getting rid of either of these guys, I'll get rid of Necro Jar to use its ability to bring out Necro Mannequin through the use of Necrocycle. And since Necro Jar is destroyed, his attack was 1500, that's 400 more than its original attack, so we mill 2 off the top of our opponent's deck, and then 2 more with Necro Yard, so that's another 4, so that's 27. Use Necro Mannequin's ability to tribute itself to special summon a Necro monster with a different name from our deck. That could be Necro Caliber Knight if we want to negate our opponent's monster effects, or if we want to get back that spell targeting protection, we could grab back another Necro Jar. But for the sake of being different, let's grab Necro Caliber Knight. And then this mills 2 at the tail end of its effect, and then Necro Yard mills another 2 on top of that, so another 4. So we've gone through 31 of our opponent's 40 card deck, leaving them with 9 cards. And if we get to our opponent's end phase, say they aren't able to get through the effect negation of Zoman of Necro, the effect negation of Necro Caliber Knight, and the floodgate of Necro Corridor, during our opponent's end phase, they will have to mill cards from their deck up to the number of monsters on the field plus the number of Necro monsters in our grave. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So that's 7. Say if our opponent doesn't have any monsters, we mill 7, and then 2 more with Necro Yard, and that adds up to a nice, perfect 40, actually. That worked out amazingly. So then on our turn, we just end our turn, pass back to our opponent, and they would lose on deck out. So that, my friends, is the Undead Lock. As you can see, again, it takes some setup. It's hard to fully showcase it without you showing it against another deck, but I just kind of wanted to show the different kinds of moves that are available, the different kinds of combos that you can pull together depending on what you search and the monsters that you bring out with things like Necro Mannequin. So again, much like the Destiny board deck that was Dark Spirit deck that we showed last week, very non-linear but still fun to play, a good control deck nonetheless. All these cards are available for public use on Dueling Book, and be sure to like and subscribe for a Kaiba deck coming up next week.